Hello, beautiful ones. Um, as I do, I sit with some things that are rolling around in my heart and in my head, and I steep in them, I ponder them, and I just kind of hold them for a little bit until I feel like I have some language to it. And I've been sitting with this concept, this belief, maybe even a pattern that we do kind of on a consistent basis, but maybe we don't recognize it as this. But over the years, working with clients and going into different conversations about what it would take for someone to trust themselves, to step into the full trust of themselves. And this is usually coming up at a time when we're talking about something that they want to do, something, a new project or a new direction in life, or making a really important personal decision to live their full authentic self. And so that's usually the the context of that question, like what would it take for you to trust yourself? And I notice over the years that the most common response is to the question of, well, why don't you do that? What's keeping you from stepping into that trust? And the most common response I get from people is, I'm afraid of what people will say, and a variation of that, I'm afraid of what people will think of me. And so there's this energy that we walk around with in this world, to further substantiate our safety and our security, where we are constantly looking out into the world and navigating based on the clues that we see from other people of whether or not it is safe for us to be ourselves. And so this creates the subconscious habit, because I don't think it's a conscious thing, unconscious habit, right? Of never having our eyes in towards ourselves, of what it would mean to trust ourselves. We would first have to focus on self. We are so busy focusing on other people, focusing on how our family is receiving us, focusing on how coworkers or friends or people in our community, how they are receiving us or rejecting us. And we're so good at noticing facial cues and body language and tone of voice. We're so good at that we will adapt for more safety. If we recognize someone might have an issue with something we said, we will correct that behavior and we'll try and change it. Sometimes those things we're very aware of them, but a lot of the times they're so subtle that we don't even recognize that we are shifting and adapting ourselves to fit some sort of mold that we think is being asked of us, whether it is or not. Sometimes our perception would have us believe that this person doesn't agree with us and we should shift so that we are better accepted. And so as I sit with this concept, this feeling, this pondering of what is keeping us from trusting ourselves, primarily I feel like it's because we rarely focus on ourselves. When we learn how to turn eyes in and focus on our own energetic self, it creates this really beautiful, obvious boundary. While we're still living our life and having interaction with other people, it creates this really beautiful container of awareness. And we know what we want in there and we know what we don't want in there. And so we have better boundaries that naturally start occurring the more we turn eyes in. We start saying no when we don't feel like the thing that's being asked of us is in full alignment with us. We're able to walk away from situations without feeling the need to over explain or over apologize. the power to survive is strong in all living things. It is the organism's desire to continue life. And so we lean into that survival mechanism. But humans we have not monitored that very well. And we have allowed that biological craving to survive to take over our whole lives. There are people that would rather suffer in their silence. They would rather not step into their full authentic self so that people accept them. And so this craving to survive has corrupted our ability to take risk and go forward and try new things and expand into our full self. We are so busy surviving that we're not living. And so as I sit in that for myself, right, I feel the fear and the resistance to that. That's biological. That's mixed in there with our trauma for all the times we were rejected. So it's valid. This isn't an irrational fear. This is a very valid place to live because we have been harmed. We have been rejected. We have been criticized and judged and scolded and shunned. So it's a valid fear. But part of me wonders how much of it we're actually believing that we're in danger without questioning that. Like, are we actually in danger when we want to go write a book and someone might not like the story we tell? Are we actually in danger? Or is it our past and our fear that has us believe that we should just not do that thing and just live in the status quo? I don't have the answer. I don't think it's a quick answer of how to trust yourself. I don't think that it's a cookie cutter version answer. I think everyone has their own issues because their own journey and their own woundedness and their trauma, etc., has dictated that lack of trust for self. So it is a very personal journey to come back to self. But I can tell you, the more I practice turning my eyes in, asking my system if I have the capacity for that, the more I give myself grace for making mistakes and give myself some latitude for trying something and failing at it, the more I soften that inner critic, that harshness that I very easily can have against myself, I'm noticing how trust is naturally growing. And just one final thought on that, I think that there's a really beautiful movement happening where in the past we used to think healing was such a hard job. We had to work at it and it had to be hard and diligent. We had to stay with like this really, you had to force, you had to push through the hardness so that you could get to the other side. In a very masculine energy way, we had to like shock and awe, search and destroy is what I usually call it. Like you had to search and destroy, get all the traumas out of you. And where that might have worked at one point, it isn't where we are anymore. Healing is softer now. It's quiet. It's reflective. It's internal. It's having grace. And that is the thing that I am learning the most is the softer I am about my healing process, the more traction I get in the moving forward in it. So just something to kind of keep in your pocket if you're one of those people that still believe that. We were taught that. We were taught you had to be diligent and had to force it and had to push it and you just had to, right? And there are times when that's appropriate, but not all the time. So just something to kind of hold on to. But a question I'd like to leave you with is, what would it take for you to begin to trust yourself? What are some little steps, baby steps that you can start taking that would start to let trust expand within you? We're all seeking ourselves. We're all coming back home. And trust is going to be at the forefront of that. If we don't trust, we won't come back home. We will constantly seek out in the world what it is we think we're missing. And that's never going to fill us up. And so turning eyes in and being able to go into the self and give care and give grace and ask the right questions, that begets trust. So I hope that resonates with you. If not, you're always welcome to toss it aside. But for those it resonates with, I suggest just kind of being in it and just expanding in it, rolling around and asking some questions for yourself and see what comes up. Enjoy.